and that's after 3 other children. I thought I was going to get off easy because Ed had kept on saying to me, you ought to go back to your master's degree, you're on a roll now. But I said, oh no, I've got 4 kids, you know, no way. But then he started saying, changing his tune, he's saying, I think you really should go to law school. You know, with all you know about kids with disabilities and children, you ought to be able to go to law school and maybe use it. That was his way of getting me to think about it. And I said, no way, I can hardly spell. You know I can't do math, and if they have accounting, I'll never be able to do that in law school, and it takes me forever to read. That's the other thing. I have to read everything twice. And it wasn't going to be easy, because I learned that when I went back to college at DePaul. It took me forever to read whatever I was doing, and I had to read everything twice to really absorb. So
that is character building, though, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess. But I wasn't going to come home and flunk a class with 3 kids. They were going to be... They'd be really mad at me. You know, Mom, you can't be flunking. So unbeknownst to him, I took the law school entrance exam because he kept on ragging me about it. And actually, I did okay. I mean, I didn't do really well. But at that time in 1979, law schools were looking to have more women, and especially older women, come back to school.
Well, you were hardly an older woman.
No, but for law school.
For law school, in those days.
In those days, it was an advantage. So I was accepted actually to 3 different law schools. But by the time I took the LSAT and I started writing that, he did know about it, and I didn't know if I was ever going to be able. But I did what he suggested, thinking that he knew, since he knew before, what I didn't know about myself. He thought he saw something in me that I didn't realize in myself. If he thinks I could do it, I should be able to, and he promised he'd help me write, because I wasn't really good at writing. In view of the fact what I do today, oh my gosh, I can't believe that. But I got in and I started to love it. Every aspect of the law was about people, which I loved, and what they did to each other and what they were going to do to each other, and trying to figure out and trying to help. So that's how I just ended up loving the law.
So now you're looking for a way to put it to use, and do I remember you said you opened up a neighborhood practice?
Yes, well, because by then I was 40 years old and 4 children. I was not able to go to the state's attorney's office, and I never would have gotten into a big firm because I just didn't have the grades. I was an ordinary student, but I did pass everything, and I passed the bar, so that was good. So Ed set me up in a neighborhood law office storefront, right 4 blocks from the house on 51st Street near Washtenaw. And being older, all our friends were lawyers, or most of them, or possibly were in the law, and very experienced lawyers by then. Pat Tewitt and Sidney Karasik and Al Balyunas, Larry O'Gara, a number of them were our friends. And Ed kind of put the arm on them to work out of the South Side once in a while on cases and let me second chair them. So that's how I learned to do murder trials, to be a class action lawyer. I schlepped around with all our friends. Pat Tewitt
was a criminal lawyer.
Was a criminal lawyer, one of the top in the country. His graduation present, we were close friends, he and his wife, gave to me my graduation present. I'll give to you 1 free murder trial. It had everything in it. Insurance policies, all kinds of things, and it was a jury murder trial, and he taught me how to be in front of a jury, what to wear, what not to wear, how to sit next to the defendant and converse with him, and so I mean it was such a training ground, personal.
Well, it's I happen to be a lawyer myself, and what I'm marveling at is this is kind of like an upside down law firm. When you're in a big firm and you're starting out, there are different people with specialties who become models to do different kinds of things. But when you're in a neighborhood office, usually the disadvantage is you just work with the 1 or 2 people who happen to be there. Mm-hmm. But these specialists came to you.
Yes, because they were our friends.
Came to the community.
Yeah.
And so you had the benefit of those different role models.
Absolutely.
Sidney Karasik, again, it's an example of a lawyer in a different specialty.
Yes.
Who was...
We worked on a class action together, and he was the lawyer's lawyer. I mean, during his career, his luminous career, he never missed a term arguing a case in the Illinois Supreme Court. He was the go-to person for that. And then it was amazing. We sued the Attorney General and Walgreens, Kmart, and other stores for collecting taxes for medical appliances, women's needs, Kotex and tampons and things like that. It was a statewide class action.
When there were certain sales tax exemptions that arguably should have covered
right,
that.
Yes, and it was a case that Sidney and I worked on together. It was my case. The person came to me, and I, referred it to Sidney, and we did it together. And then there was another case that was unbelievable that I worked on. It was a treaty violation between the United States and the UK. My client...
wait a minute, this is a neighborhood law office?
Yes.
Okay.
And how I know is, how this happened was, this man, Lou Scully, his son was a person who had been arrested often on and off and jailed for different crimes. And this particular case, Lou Scully, I knew, separate from my husband, because he was a natatorium instructor for the Chicago Park District, and he also put on the air and water shows. But we were friends from the Park District, and now I'm in a neighborhood law office. But my husband knew him from business in the neighborhood. He had a car wash as well. His son, Lou's son, got into trouble. And he was arrested at O'Hare Airport and brought to the Metropolitan Correctional Center and was charged with stealing the Marlborough diamond in London at an arcade. And so Lou comes in to Ed's ward office and sits down and says, I'm all out of money. I've been using all my money, having him represent Ed Jensen and all, for all these years in other kinds of areas, and now he's arrested in this matter, and I need some help. Well, Ed Jensen, who is another world-famous criminal lawyer, represented him as co-counsel in England on the actual criminal aspect of the case. But there was a treaty between the UK and the United States, a repatriation treaty, in which Ed wasn't going to represent him when he was convicted. And he did get convicted, and now he wanted to do his time in the United States. And the UK said yes, but the US government said no. So he was denied the opportunity to come to the United States to do it. So I called Sidney Karasik, and I said, Sidney, this is the situation. I don't know anything about treaties other than they do exist. You learn what you need to know to pass the bar exam for treaties, and it wasn't my area. So together, he shepherded me through the research. He shepherded me through writing the briefs. We sued the Attorney General, Ed Meese, and the U.S. Attorney General and the State Department for not repatriating the client. We won in federal district court here. Then, of course, it was appealed in U.S. Court of Appeals here and reversed. And I wanted to go to the United States Supreme Court, of course, and Sidney said, okay, so we wrote the PLA for that, but it was denied. But that was a neighborhood office. And neighbors came in, people who would not normally go to a lawyer for their wills or a traffic accident would come to my office, and I'd learned how to do that. I did some probate for them, and disabled persons and...
I was just going to ask, what was
children.
Disability in
Yes.
children?
Yes.
I could imagine.
Yes. So my old park program, those children that I taught when they were little and now were adults, and the parents needed to become their guardians, I talked to Judge Novosolsky at probate court, and I said I had 55 disabled young adults whose parents need to become their guardians. Can we do this to, instead of having them each pay for a guardian ad litem and everything, can we do this some way? So he helped me fashion a mass, filling out the applications, and one guardian ad litem, and they all came to court one day, all of them, and the parents and everything, and they became the guardians for their children. It didn't cost them more than $10. So those kinds of things. And people who had estates and child custody matters. I was appointed the guardian ad litem in the domestic relations division to represent children in divorce proceedings, and I did that very, very often, and other areas like that.
Now, am I right? Your next assignment was judge in the Court of Claims.
Yes. So, but I still could have a practice as long as I didn't have a client that was suing the state of Illinois. I still could keep my practice, and I was a judge of the Court of Claims. Governor James Thompson appointed me there. I was the first woman ever of the 5 judges, and Governor Jim Edgar reappointed me in '87, and then shortly thereafter, Governor Edgar asked me to be his special counsel on child welfare, because I was very interested in juvenile court, both in the criminal violence on juveniles and also the abuse and neglect. So I did that for 2 years. And then Justice Mary Ann McMurrow appointed me to the appellate court in '84. Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry, I got the date wrong. But she appointed me, and then I ran for that, and I spent 11 years, 11 months on the appellate court, and then was appointed by Justice McMurrow and the Supreme Court to fill her vacancy that she was retiring. So I did that for 2 years, and then ran for the Supreme Court, and now it'll be 5 years I've been on the Supreme Court.
Well, why don't we pause and talk about another mentor in your life, Justice McMorrow.
Yes.
Who was a great figure in Illinois legal history, judicial history. First woman in the Illinois Supreme Court.
Yes, but she also was. Well, first of all, she was the first. She was the only woman in her Loyola Law School class in the 50s. From there, she went to the state's attorney's office and became the first woman to prosecute a felony murder trial in Cook County as a young prosecutor. And she worked her way through that. She became a trial judge. She became an appellate court judge, and then ran for the Supreme Court. But what an interesting story is, as a young prosecutor in the state's attorney's office, she prosecuted felony murder trials. And
so she was given some of the very
toughest cases. And she also is an interesting story. The defendant appealed, and also appealed to the Illinois Supreme Court. Now, this is in the late 50s. She was preparing her argument. She wrote the brief for the Supreme Court in Illinois, and she was preparing her oral argument for the Illinois Supreme Court when her male supervisor said to her, "Mary Ann, what are you doing?" She says, "I'm getting ready for the oral argument in the Supreme Court." And he goes, "No, women do not argue in the Illinois Supreme Court." She was denied the opportunity to argue because she was a woman in the Illinois Supreme Court. Then, we know now, she ran and became the first woman to be elected to the Illinois Supreme Court, and its first woman Chief Justice.